Thank you. I wanted to also to endorse the comments of my two colleagues, Mr. McKinley and Mr. Chairman Tonko, about the need for bipartisanship. I mean, I think this idea of waiting till the next election to see what happens is not the most constructive for the country. And I certainly think that if it's not bipartisan, it generally doesn't pass. And if it's not bipartisan, it certainly doesn't last. So I'd like to join that chorus. I wanted to focus my questions today on the disconnect, though, in this statute between the setting of maximum contaminant level goals and what it might take to make those goals a reality. Many of the landmark environmental laws set ambitious goals and they get there step by step. But it isn't clear to me that the Safe Drinking Water Act is doing that. And the example I want to take is lead, which is certainly one of the most dangerous contaminants, one we know that there's no safe level for. But this year, the EPA proposed a new lead and copper rule that keeps the same action level that's been in place since 1991. In other words, on lead, nearly 30 years later, we haven't made progress in getting our standard closer to our goal. And we've seen in places like Flint the enormous damage that lead and the heavy metals does to constituents, particularly children. So, Ms. Wu, what do you think about the example of the lead and copper rule and the need for whether that shows the need for reform of the Safe Drinking Water Act in particular?
Yeah, I mean, lead is also a great example of where we haven't had good, strong protective standards. And, you could have EPA, the action level that EPA sets isn't even a health-based standard. It's just an action level at which action has to be taken. And so the fact that there's not even a set kind of health-based number is kind of telling that we can't regulate how much lead is in people's water.
Is there a particular way you'd like to see the statute strengthened so that we can make progress toward safety goals, maybe on these most dangerous constituents?
Yeah, I mean, I think in addition to some of the fixing of the legal standard itself, there are some contaminants that we do know, like lead, have a lot of both public health impacts that have adverse impacts and are also showing up in people's water. The PFAS is an example, perchlorate as an example. We have Legionella, we have hexavalent chromium. So these are ones that we know are high hazard anyway. And so we could also say in the statute, like EPA had to have done in the past, say it's time to set standards for these. We don't have to go through all of the other rigmarole, but really say set some standards for these high hazard contaminants.
Right, and there's some contaminants for which there's really the dose response ratio or relationship is really almost irrelevant because they're so toxic. And I think lead is one of those, as I think is chromium and so forth. Ms. Vandehey, one of the things you mentioned in your testimony was new technologies. I think you mentioned reverse osmosis, but maybe there's others that are cutting edge water treatment technologies, the advantages they offer. What would you like to see the federal government do to make the use of those technologies more appealing for water systems around the country?
That's a very good question. RO is a membrane technology, and we've had membrane technologies for years now, and they are used in, I think, primarily large water systems for particular contaminants because they're so expensive to purchase, number one, and to use. And so when they're not in need, they're not used. And so there's a way to bring those kinds of technologies within price range that would probably help a lot. The other thing that I think we saw I'm sorry to go back to the 1996 amendments, is at one time the baseline technology was GAC, and that didn't make it into the statute because it is much more complicated depending on how the treatment process is set up. And I know someone here said that they were familiar with how that's done, that the quality of the water they're using, what impact that has on a particular treatment technology. And if there was a magic bullet that would take out everything in water, I think people would find that just great. But I don't think such a statement.
Well, I appreciate that. My time has expired. I thank the witnesses for being here today, and I hope you'll continue to engage with the committee as we move forward to improve this important law. And I yield back.